guys, how y'all doing? Thank you so much to Ryan, and also can we give a round of applause to the Young Alumni Board for all of their incredible work? So I see some students in the audience, I see some alum in the audience. This question is for all of you. Raise your hand if you ever changed your mind about what you wanted to be when you grew up. Great. Now for my students out there, raise your hand if you told someone your major and they said, what are you going to do with that? Anyone? Raise your hand if, when you were approaching graduation, you became a little worried when all of your business major friends were getting offers and you were still waiting by the phone for that job offer. Anyone out there? I'm going to give you guys high fives later because that was me, and I'm here to tell you that it's going to be okay. But I can remember when it didn't feel like it was going to be okay. In fact, 2 weeks before my own Notre Dame undergraduate graduation, I got a call from the School of Arts and Letters because Dean McGreevy wanted to know what I was going to do next year because he wanted to include it in the commencement address. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do next year. And I heard a voice at the other end of the line say, oh, okay, and then a click. And so come graduation day, I am sitting there so scared, and Dean McGreevy goes through a list of all of my prestigious colleagues and peers and what they're going to do. And then he says, and Nicole Sganga, who worked as a journalism student and traveled from London to Burma to Lebanon, covering ethnic conflict, well, next year, she's going to do whatever she was meant to do. Whatever she was meant to do is the nicest way anyone can describe unemployment, hands down. But let me back up a little. So when it was not okay, by the way, so this is me on the campaign trail. That's Cory Booker. I'm a sucker for dad jokes. So just for a quick explanation of that photo, these are also photos that I've taken on the trail. So when I was first starting to get interested in journalism, I did what every reasonable person does. I went to the internet and I Googled journalism quotes. And one of the journalism quotes that came up right away, I can just say it. Oh, great. Journalism is an act of faith in the future. It's still one of my favorite quotes to this day by Ann Curry, NBC anchor. And I did a little bit of digging, and I found out that Ann Curry's producer, Tom Batag, was actually a Notre Dame alum. And so after about a year, I worked up the courage to send him an email. Here is the email that says, ND student requesting advice, and it says, Dear Mr. Batag, my name's Nicole. I'm a sophomore majoring in political science. This is the best response I've ever received. Dear Nicole, you have hit me at a slightly crazy time in the middle of shooting a complicated story. I need to get past Thanksgiving before I can give you some serious thought. Which, I don't know, I find that pretty hilarious to this day. But Tom actually did give me a lot of advice. He asked me a lot of questions, and I called him up when I was at the airport yesterday coming here, and I said, what do I tell these students? What do I tell these alum about my path? And he gave me the same piece of advice that he gave me back then, which is go outside your circle and lean into failure. Ask yourself constantly, why not me? So while I had some successes at Notre Dame, I think everyone in this group did, I also had a lot of failures. I got to campus. I knew I wanted to try some on-camera reporting. The best way to do that was to be on the football field. I had never been to a football game before. And so I bought a stack of Football for Dummies books, and I read up, and I made friends with some of the football players, and I remember asking TJ Jones why he and Stephon Tuitt wore the same number. I was like, doesn't that get confusing on the field? And then the wide receiver had to explain to me the difference between the defensive and offensive line. But I ended up at the football college championships reporting on the sidelines after I mastered that. I also decided back in college that I was going to try new things. So I joined an Arabic class. I soon all but failed out of that Arabic class, but I decided to still attend the lectures because I was really interested in learning more about Middle Eastern politics and culture. The professor, Hara, said, Nicole, you're not enrolled in this class, please leave. I kept coming back, and then finally she said, I think you should try for this fellowship in Beirut, Lebanon. It would be really good for you. I tried to apply to Notre Dame for some funding. It was not on the State Department safety list, and so I ended up paying my way there with money that I had made through some journalism internships. I came back and decided that I wanted to do more international reporting, and I went on an international reporting assignment with the New York Times with Nick Kristof to Burma. I wanted to talk about human rights policy, some of the injustices that ethnic minorities were facing there, specifically the Rohingya community. I wanted to talk about the international world stage, the leaders that were letting us down, and Nick looked at me and said in a very kind way, Nicole, you need more expertise for this. Why don't you apply to become a Rhodes Scholar? So I applied to become a Rhodes Scholar, made it through the finalist round twice, was rejected twice, and decided, you know what, maybe there's still a way I can do this. So I applied to Oxford for their international human rights law program. I was finally accepted, went there, finished my degree, all the while working at CBS News. I started out at the very lowest rung of the ladder at CBS News. I got coffees for everyone that needed a coffee. I hung out in the conference room just so that I could get a word in edgewise when we were having discussions about the political debate stage in the Democratic Convention. I met President Barack Obama because I volunteered to hold the coat of one of our CBS News anchors who was filming a 60-minute story. That ended up being one of the first 60-minute stories I ever got a producer credit on. I memorized the platforms of every single 2016 candidate, and I offered the anchors to rehearse with them when they were preparing for their debates. I contributed foreign policy questions when they determined that, oh, she has a degree in international human rights law. And after that, I finally noticed something. Instead of being everyone's last resort, they started to ask me if I wanted to travel a little bit more covering breaking news. They said, here's a camera, can you use it? To which I said, yes, absolutely I can do this. Taught myself in 48 hours how to use the broadcasting equipment and ended up going to Boone, Iowa to my first trip on the road with CBS News. Then the request came trickling in, would you drive into the floodwaters in the Midwest to cover the climate crisis there? Would you interview the Little Rock Nine on the 60th anniversary of the school's desegregation? Would you fly out to Las Vegas to cover the mass shooting and interview families who have lost loved ones? Would you drive from West Virginia to Oklahoma to talk to teachers who are striking? Would you embed with the Marines? Would you go on Air Force Two to see the aftermath of Hurricane Maria on Christmas? And I said yes to everything. And I learned two things quickly. When you are the last resort, you end up being the first option, ultimately, if you work hard enough. The second thing is I got outside of Washington, D.C., and I saw the broken ends of the U.S. political system. And I decided, after seeing the frustration of people who were driven out to the polls in 2016, of viewing the natural disasters on the ground and people whose houses were 3 feet underwater, of meeting military families during the government shutdown that couldn't afford toilet paper, of meeting teachers who had to survive on food stamps, of meeting relatives, of meeting, I'm sorry, I get a little choked up when I talk about this, of meeting the victims of mass shootings and their family members. I remember meeting a family member who had lost not one, but 2 members of her family in 2 different mass shootings. And I decided that what I was meant to do was to hold truth to power and to ask those folks that were running for president of the United States what they were going to do about all of that. And so, Dean McGreevy, the opportunity actually did come. I actually did end up doing what I was meant to do. And my message to you today is don't worry about it if what you want to do doesn't seem super reasonable. Don't worry about it if you think you're making it up as you go along. Don't worry about it if what you're doing now makes you feel uncomfortable. You're doing it right. Shoot your shot. Thank you.